Hello and welcome, Draft League fans. I'm your host, King05, joined once again by OG Albina, and we also have Burger in the call. So, you know, we're gonna do some
Two
talking.
R's.
Yeah,
Two
three R's
R's.
actually, if you put them all together.
It's four
I
hours on the
couldn't
show
read
note,
that
maybe.
far.
Yeah, that would be a challenge for someone like you. Yeah.
Wait, is it really four? Four? Like
Yeah.
three in a row on show? Why would you do that?
So if we're gonna go to some more backstory, I forgot my password to my double R account, so I had to make a 3R account.
But I'm the stupid one talking. Okay, keep going.
Oh, we got some burger lore. Wow, that's crazy. Anyways, so the topic of this
Peacefully.
video is going to be terrestrialization, right? Which is a big word, I know. It's pretty scary, but that's why we're here to guide you through it. Alright, so got some replays as well from the TGS to give you something to look at.
Very BKC-esque.
Yes,
I'm just gonna waffle for 40 minutes and have random games on in the background.
pretty much, yeah.
And the whole point is to kind of talk about how different Tera is everywhere. It's not like any other mechanic where in Gen 7, the difference between mega rule sets would be early on leagues would make you first turn mega and then not first turn mega, and then in Gen 7 I think Z move rules were pretty universal. Gen 8 there was no gimmick because Dynamax is broken, and now in Gen 9 I don't think there's any two leagues that do it exactly the same between Terra pricing and the format they do and all that shit. So it's it's a very weird topic to talk about, I think, or it's very difficult to kind of talk about Terra as a whole.
Yeah, even
We're gonna
more than
try.
that, every single league thinks they do it right, and it's all completely different. It's so funny.
Oh yeah, they think they do it right, but it's also an adamant we're right, every other rule is shit, which is
Yeah.
again really weird because if it was right, I feel everybody would be doing it. I don't know, and there are some that are a little bit more
There's
universal, or at least the
yeah,
basic premise.
there's
Yeah,
some that
there's
are
some
more
that are
standard than
standardized,
others.
yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Speaking of not standardized Wi-Fi rules,
Shout out, Goofy.
Shout out
I as
YouTuber
as re-
segues.
yeah, well, as resident Wi-Fi guy in YouTube, man, I think I've said it very adamantly in every video in League. I do not like the Wi-Fi rules, whether it be low tier Terra or normal Terra. I hate the 2 Terra types or the 3 Terra types, and you can pick 1 stab and 2 non-stab. I think it's very restricting, and I don't think Terra is a problem in the builder. I think it's a problem in game, or the problems with Terra are in game. So restricting the one fun part that rewards good building is not very fun. I don't like it at all.
Yeah, there's also just the level of how insane the meta is right now. Some
Mhm.
super offensive things. If you have Terra Reviv Room, something really good like that, that's as good as when you're a big Pokemon, it sometimes could create some imbalance in teams, especially with the teams they get the really good top halves and then just the really good Terra captains.
And another thing too is I feel one of the ways you deal with Terra is with Terra. You fight fire with fire, and if your guy just has better typings in the matchup, I can't outbuild that. I can't if you have Terra Dark on Xmon and I don't have a Dark resist that's good, but I can't Terra Fairy my Terramon and gain another resistance because it wasn't the type I picked 5 weeks ago. I'm just screwed. To get my ass beat by it. It's that's tough. Whereas otherwise, there's an interesting dynamic. Is in my game against Aster, I was Terra Dragon for the longest time because it smoked. But then in Mox, I was getting ran up on by Terra Fairy or Chaladon, and I was oh shit, I should probably go Terra Steel and account for that. So I feel it's a lot more interesting, and there's more layers to the Terra, and it doesn't feel as overwhelming when you feel you have enough tools to take it on, and it's not just my guys are better than yours this week. GG.
I mean, I don't think that's really the case in Wi-Fi that often, anyways, because there's not really good enough building to take advantage of advantages like that, you know. But in general, it's for the content.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I guess just on concept, and I don't think it makes for interesting content. Or at least, I mean, maybe for one guy, if I pull up and I have Terra Flying River Room in a matchup or some shit, and it absolutely rolls in smoke. That's cool for me. The other guy's not getting a good video out of that, obviously, because I think I know a lot of times Wi-Fi, it's for the content. I agree to an extent. You want to allow fun things, and maybe you have a wacky rule set or here or there. It's more about the production stuff like that. But also, people, even if it's like casual people, they want to watch like good close games and like people playing well and guys winning and losing and stuff like that. So if it's just like the same people getting rolled, the same people winning over and over again, and it's because of the same reasons, and it's just, I don't know. I feel like that's also not fun content. Like it's only so funny to see the random low tier Tera get a sweep, and you're like, "Ha, that's funny." That mod usually doesn't do that, but then it has 24 kills by the end of the season. You're like, "Oh shit." That's not
Yeah.
very fun.
24 kills and it's on like 50 thumbnails because you and your opponent both put it on the thumbnail. And you're like, oh,
Shout
I
out.
wonder which one did good this week. Oof.
Dude, I don't remember what it was. Oh, it wasn't a Wi-Fi league, but again, it was like a low tier Terra, same type of rules. It was a Showdown league, but the same kind of thing. My buddy's using the Dunsparce in like a low tier Terra league and has like 20 kills in 5 games. How the fuck does he have 20 kills in 5 games when he's like 8 points? I don't know. I'm very not have. I don't like the Wi-Fi rules right now. They're not fun.
All right, so that segment took a little bit, but we can get back on track. So the different type of rule sets, right? There's Wi-Fi, which we all agree is like not optimal at all. But then there's also a pretty standardized across the Showdown community concept of like banning the top Terra guys, and then everything else can Terra, and you get like 1 or 2 users depending on the league, and they can be worth different points or whatever. But generally, you have 1 or 2 users, and you have Terra preview with free Terra. So that's like pretty much the case in most places, right?
Yeah, and then if now, maybe I explain it wrong because a lot of times when I try and again explain it to people like Wi-Fi, like why Terra Preview kind of makes the mechanic feel a lot better in play and in the builder. What's like that like the idea and concept behind with like not doing restrictive types so you don't have to account for 20 types in the game, but a lot of people like build with every type and then at least knowing when you're going in so you can adjust accordingly. Is it just that, like not having to guess 10 different types?
I mean, for me, it's like when I'm prepping, I generally can tell which types are likely to come, which ones are the most viable from my opponent. And so I can like build around like 3 or 4 Terras at most, and like that's not too restrictive. It was a little challenging at the beginning of the gen, no lie, but you do get used to it and you learn different ways to like cover different typings like naturally. So like it's kind of a learned skill at some point, but you can account for all those in the builder, and then when you show up to the game, you have the Terra preview, like, oh, we know for a fact that this Raging Bolt is water. So the counterplay that I prepped for like Terra Fairy on the Raging Bolt, I don't really have to worry about that as much. I only have to worry about what I brought for water. And so
Yeah.
then it like eases prediction as well, because you're like, well, is it going to Terra to water or is it going to stay Electric Dragon? It's only 2 options. It's not, oh, I don't know what type it's going to be, and then like I have to guess between a million possibilities. No, it's like pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah,
And
and
it's
the
great thing, like in the game as well, like what L5 said, you can account for both things. You can account in the builder because you can prep for Terra types. Just because there's all 10 Terra types in the game, you don't want to be like going up against Enamorous and expecting it to be like Terra
grass or something. Dude,
that's
that
like
was
useless.
crazy.
Oh, that was on the same wavelength here. But like, and then when you're in the game, if you don't know what the Terra type is, it's a 0 factor, and it could be something that loses you the game immediately if you just don't know what the Terra type is because you just guessed wrong. At least with preview, you have accountability in how you prep, and you can like figure it out in the game and adjust your strategy based on that when you're in the game, compared to not being able to see the type, and then you just like, yeah, I got fucked. I picked the wrong type.
Well, and one more thing really quick, so we don't stick on it too long like we did with the last thing. I think another thing too is when you don't know the typing of the mon going in, like obviously for lack of a better term, nothing's like a 50-50 exactly, right? It's always different percentages, but like the 50-50 or like the coin flip kind of aspect of Terra, which we'll talk about later, if you don't know what typing it can turn into, it's never in your favor. It's just like a guessing game because, or at least it's more in the Terra users' favor because you can think, okay, from their perspective, they need to cover for water, for ground, for steel, blah blah blah. I know that I'm this type, and I can either not Terra and account for them, going for my Terra, or I can just Terra and know that they're not gonna be able to attack into this typing because I might be this or this or this, and they can't just afford to lose if I'm those typing. So I feel like I don't know. It still is coin flippy, or I guess 50-50-ish, even though nothing's like a true. There's very little true 50-50s. but it makes that guessing game a little bit less stressful on the opposing side of the Terra.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on a little bit. So another type of Terra rule set is like DPL style. Now, what I mean by this is we were like the first ones to actually implement Terra Preview, which has luckily caught on pretty much everywhere in the showdown scene. So that was good. And then also in our draft board, if anything was too good with Terra that we deemed like it was broken, the mon was just straight up banned, which did help a lot of like reducing the top end threat. So like the overall general power level was a little bit more manageable. This was right at the beginning of the gen, so it was like a little bit overwhelming to like allow everything, which a lot of people were
Mm-hmm.
doing. But we figured with Terra Preview we can like kind of curb that like guessing game, and then by banning a lot of the top end, we also decrease the power level there, so it's like a more manageable metagame where like the better player will win more often, which is like always the goal for like these hyper competitive leagues, right?
Yeah, I feel like that was like it was a very optimal way, like at least at the start of the gen when we're like still trying to like get everything around. Obviously, things like sometimes slip where we see like stuff like Baxcalibur that got allowed, but that was still once again early gen. We didn't know it was the most broken guy ever with Terra. The only issue with it now is like, especially with the DLC dropping, it's pretty tough to because there's a lot of really good mons with Terra. You get the Lottie twins that are broken with Terra, Curum, Gouging Fire, Iron Boulder. And at this point, we'd be having to ban a lot of Pokemon, which
Mm-hmm.
is not a bad thing in nature, but if people still want to try out new toys, it can
Yeah,
get a little bit tough.
I was saying like I think the main thing is like at this point, right? The meta's been like it's like a year and a half at this point, right? So it's not like a lot of these things are new. So I think if it's decided that the most competitive way of doing things is no Terra bans, kind of cut down the overall power level of the league or of the tournament, the format in general, to kind of make things not feel as insane. Like, does your top mon do better than my top mon? Do I lose because of that kind of thing? I think it's a valid and like kind of a fair way of going about it. I just think that people need to be willing to like recognize, okay, you're gonna have to ban a lot of things. Obviously, you're gonna have to ban a good majority of the top end of the board in a lot of instances because you want to make sure that like one of those borderline mons that you didn't want to ban in Terra because you're like, well, in X League they didn't do that good. Well, it's probably because all the other broken guys were just a little bit better. So you kind of really do have to slash the board a good amount. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, especially at this point where if it feels terrible, especially in like an 8 mon setting too, where like a lot of those offensive pieces can feel even more crazy because you don't have the resources to allocate to drafting counterplay to them in every instance. So.
Yeah. So anyways, so we can also look at another option that like has started to pop up a little bit, and that's just straight up banning Terra overall. Most notably, this was done in the Well. I think Burger was a part of that, right?
Indeed. Yeah, so the well, it was ran by TJ. He tried to just test out no Terra, and it's an interesting format, right? Because it, it my opinion of it was a little dry because it felt a little bit like Gen 8 at times, just because you could because there was no new mechanic. But at the same time, it allowed for different playstyles. Like I decided to experiment with myself, and I drafted a lot of fat on my team, which otherwise fat cores like like they're fine. They're not great with Terra because they can kind of just get destroyed by a Terra type that just ruins your core and then blah 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 you lose. But that was my opinion on it. You can kind of play around with different playstyles, which is nice. I also think you need to keep the meta can change a little bit with the offensive Pokemon. Like I had Palafin, which I thought was kind of like Giga broken because nothing can get Terra Water anymore to get out of its resistances. So the meta definitely changes with no Terra. I know OG Albina is a no Terra fan, so I'll let him speak about
I
that.
I am now. Granted, I say this with not a lot of experience in that rule set. I don't think I've played a league that was like full no Terra, but every time I play, again we'll talk about it later. I don't think Terra is like objectively broken, but I don't think I enjoy it. Is the main thing. So I think like again as the resident Wi-Fi guy, I know that I'm not really at this point in time at least able to convince people into free Terra preview in any way. So I'm thinking for next like BBR season, like the main Wi-Fi league I run and help run. I think we've kind of decided the next season we're gonna try no Tera and see how it feels and see how people enjoy it. Obviously, from a content side, there's a whole discussion about it. I don't think it matters. I don't think people will care if you don't put Tera Refer Room in the title and you just put Refer Room. But I think it's definitely interesting. We'll talk about it a little bit later, more I guess. But just because something isn't objectively broken, I don't know if that means it's like necessarily like super healthy or enjoyable in a sense. And I think it's gonna kind of I think Terror is gonna lead to like a very quick like decline in like community interest in Gen 9 because of how like centralizing it can feel at times. Well, and again, whether or not it's broken is a different discussion, you know. But yeah,
What will I do without my Terra Squawk ability on my thumbnail?
to Big
no.
Billy.
It's over.
All
But
right.
yeah,
I think that was a good segment on like no Terra, your opinions of it. Last thing I wanted to talk about is like the low tier Terra, like unrestricted. I know one of the Smogon tournaments for Draft League, they tried
yeah.
this out, right? I wasn't really too like keyed into that whole tournament,
I
but
played in it. I played in it actually. That was it was the trios one, right?
I think so. Yeah, actually, didn't you
Yeah,
make it
I
pretty
played in
far?
it. I I liked low tier Terra more when it was open Terra, like Terra preview stuff like that. I thought it was fun. My issue with low tier Terra is like I feel like my low tier guys become as valuable as my 16, 17 point guys, and I feel like that's not fun, right? Like and granted, I had two really good Terra captains in my opinion. I had Gyarados, who I think is really fucking fun with Terra. Like objectively, maybe not the most broken guy ever. Obviously, if you're doing like high tier Terra, but when like the threshold of mons like in Tera, Gyarados, when you can turn any typing and flip resistances, get turned to an electric type and fucking nuke every water and blah blah blah. That guy, and then I had Terra Mesprit, super fun. But they were also really fucking broken. Like it felt weird. I don't know. And again, the same thing when I would play into like mons of similar skill levels. I don't like that my guy that cost me like 8, 9, 10 points is as broken as my round one pick because of funny Terra button. You know.
Yeah, that's something I was thinking about, right? When you have like low tier Terras, you're like hyper inflating the value of those low tiers so that when you're actually prepping, you have like way more threats to deal with, right? Because you still have your like 18-point mon, your 16-point mon, whatever, but you also have an 8-point mon that's like really, really good. Like it's just adding another thing you have to prep for. Whereas if your top mons are Terra, that's not adding an extra slot of like a big threat. I don't
You just
know.
have to be careful that you're not allowing like super broken things to Terra, and as long
Well,
as
of
that's not the
course.
case, I think that high tier Terra is just or high tier. You know, everything can Terra. I guess is the better way of putting it. Like you could Terra your fucking Gyarados if you want. It's not like the worst thing in the world, but I don't. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan on forced low tier Terra.
Yeah, I as well. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but you know, it's not the worst system that I've seen. You know. All right. So in my notes, I have uh, small segment trashing Wi-Fi players again. LOL. John Jr. is an op. so
No, John Strays.
so I just wanted
John.
to reiterate
I don't
that the Wi-Fi system is like, in my opinion, by far the worst option out of all of these. But so why are they so cringe? Is it like just for the content, or are they actually this silly? Right? I'm a little bit memeing here, but I really do mean it when I say like it's probably the worst option.
I think as spokesperson, I think it's just a lot of. I think I talked about this in the discussion we were talking about last time. Wi-Fi players, a lot of times, and especially this gen, like the disconnect is huge because there's no crossover, right, between like the two communities. Like there's barely any. I think I'm like one of the only people that plays in both, and even to an extent, I don't play as much as I used to in Showdown. And then also they just don't play as much, right? So the opinions or like the takes that I think a lot of Wi-Fi players have is like almost similar like what a lot of people who play like a lot of Showdown or are around and watching a shit ton of games because of X Tour that's going on, X League, their friends playing this. It's almost like Wi-Fi players. It feels like sometimes they kind of view Terra the same way a lot of Showdown guys would have like 2 months in, 3 months in. But it's been like a year and a half because the difference in like games experience, whether playing, watching, is that far.
So basically, it's a
Yeah,
skill issue.
Hmm.
That's not a nice way of putting it.
Hey, your words, not mine.
That's actually not how words work. Because you said that shit and I did
Oh,
not.
we can gloss over
If we
that.
want to talk about how words work, we could talk about some pronunciations of the word terrestrialize, but I won't get too
Terrestrialate.
deep into this.
All right, that's
Don't
a
worry,
little
I'll
bit
wait till my
silly.
segment at the end about terrestrialating at school.
All right, we can put a pin in that and come back later. All right, so let's focus more on this standard showdown stuff. Mostly it's like one or two users with preview and a few top mons banned from tearing. So like, is this the best system in your opinion? Like, I know Ojilbana, you are not the biggest fan of this because you just in general you don't like Terra, but say
I
you
think if there's a system
say
that
you're convinced Terra is like going to be included. Is this a good system? Can it be a little bit
I think
better?
yeah, I think out of every Terra thing I've done, I think I've enjoyed Terra Preview the most. I don't like obviously when like broken guys can Terra. Like I don't want to play into fucking Terra Valiant or something like that. Like that's not fun no matter what, and it's obviously broken. But again, I don't know if I necessarily think Terra's broken. I just think I don't like it, and like I think it's fair to like say it that way in a sense. Like objectively, there is counterplay and there is a bit of a skill issue, and like well, I can't deal with tear this and tear that. You probably can. There's probably a way. I do feel like it can be very restricting in the ways that you can, but they do exist. And again, if we're doing Terra, I think that 1 to 2 users is fine. I prefer that it's not two really, really broken guys. I kind of like the option of like having Terra points, like kind of how like TGS has it, or I don't know if DGB is doing it exactly like that, but I think they did the season before at least, or something, or a couple leagues I've played in on Showdown, obviously, where like you have like a Terra budget, and if a guy costs, like you get like 30 Terra points, so you can get a guy that's 20 and 10, 25 and 5. You can get 215 to have two really solid Terra guys. I think that's the way I would prefer it if it was two captains, instead of just like I can get Terra Latias and Terra Manaphy, just two random guys. Like that seems like a lot.
I kind of like the way PWS has been doing, where they pretty much wiped every Terramon on all the like even mons like mons like Roaring Moon was already Terra banned, but like they started Terra banning stuff like King Gambit, all these things that were like pretty like just obnoxious with Terra, ones that weren't usually banned though. And your best mons left for Terra like Ogre Spawn Wellspring, which is still really good, but I think that was a pretty decent format. I think at this point though, like if we're gonna Terra ban some of these like a lot of these top mons, and then you like it still has that same issue with the power creep where you have like other mons down below that are like worth a little
Just
bit,
gonna fill the place.
not as much. But so that's why I think potentially just wiping the top of the board could be an interesting idea. See
Like
how
DP, you mean like wiping as in like Terra banning them, or like DPL
banning
wiping them?
like
No,
DPL
like
wiping them.
yeah, I think that's an interesting. I know Endless's league did like something kind of similar. It was like, now granted it wasn't like Paldea, it was like Natdex. I think it was just like
Broken.
yeah. But again, I think like their best mons were like Iron Hands, T-Tar, and like there were definitely some lapses in the tiering. Like when I looked at it and stuff like that, or Mega T-Tar is what I meant. Sorry, because it was Natdex and Mega T-Tar is kind of shite. And again, like the overall skill. And now I don't know if you want to go like that low, but I think it's like I don't know. I feel like it would also keep them in a little bit more fresh. Where we're kind of getting to that like midway point in the gen, later half of the gen, where people are like, fuck, like I'm kind of sick of this already. This kind of blows.
What are you thinking, Mr. DPL Overlord?
Oh, me? Oh, shucks. I think.
Spotlight's on you.
I mean,
Can't say the wrong thing here.
I make it no secret that I really think that the top end needs to go in SV. I think the mons are way too strong for what people are be allowing these days. Like, obsessed with Ubers, etc. Like, oh, can we drop this Uber Pokemon? Oh, I bet we can.
We gotta get rid of the horse.
I have
Yeah, the horse is broken, but
on my channel, for like the channel memberships, I have a tier. It's like a $10 tier, and people
that
can be
plug
like,
right
hey,
there?
dude, hey man, give me money, pay for my coffee and gas.
I'm a big fan of
but-
plugs. You know what I'm saying?
You know
What?
L5, but one of them
Stomach on the
What
plug.
one of them's like, like if you need like, prep helper, you want to run some mocks or something like that, like once a month I got you. And one of them I had a channel member and he like showed me and like the dude had a fucking Genesect on his team. I was like, why the fuck is that guy
Bro.
there? I was like, why is that guy there? And then he was like, I don't know, man. I didn't make the tiers. I was like, all right, what's the stupid complex? I know there's always a
Yeah.
complex. I know it's like he can't fucking use extreme speed unless you're playing on Sunday night or some shit. And he said, no, it just can't use the drives. I said, the drives?
Maybe hold the drive is how you balance it even like
Dude, the
tiny
Heatran
bit.
matchup is so fucked. Otherwise, you win.
Man.
Yeah, like it was so now obviously that's a very extreme example, but there is, I mean, I've seen a lot of like really funny complex bands. Like I don't know, like Monza legit just can't use like three moves. And
Oh,
they're
I
like,
saw
it's
one
fine
time.
now.
Hold on, I saw a screenshot one time of a dock that had Magirna allowed, but it has to hold the Pokemon or it has to hold the item Pokeball, and it can't
He's a
use
D-Max
it,
captain.
and it can't use any combination of Shift Gear, Calm Mind, Stored Power, and Draining Kiss. Like if you use two of those moves, it's illegal on the same set. It was like the craziest thing I've ever seen. And it was so funny,
Dude,
and it was
it made a
also a league.
Pokemon crossword puzzle
It
in
was
the fucking game itself. That's crazy.
it was also a league that allowed like armored Pokemon from some fan game. It was like so crazy.
Dude, that's why we love Draft League. You just have some
Yeah,
crazy ass shit. Dude, shout out to the Pokemon Insurgents League that just
exactly.
randomly decided that Magirna was okay.
Where's the
But
cap drop?
only if he didn't have 12 moves.
Okay, but this is kind of like we're kind of just like, oh, these people are, they don't know what they're doing. But like in even like the like
Average.
high respect leagues, like how do I say this? Like leagues that are
More
like
more
considered
notable.
good.
Just
Yeah,
notable.
no,
Yeah.
that's the word
just
I
rip
was
the
looking
Band-Aid off.
for.
The
Lots of people
leagues that
play there
people
and there are
care
good
about.
players who play there. Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
like
that's
this
what I was
league
going at.
better. It's just, yeah,
I
more
don't know,
people
my
go
mind
there.
blinked. But like even them, they be dropping like Zamazenta and like, everything. Like Valiant is Spectrier. Like I think all of these guys are just too broken for draft. And like I might be in the minority or like the more extreme side of that where I think more things should go than other people. But like come on guys, Spectrier with Draining Kiss, like the counterplay was
Yeah, get him
already
out, bro.
strained and like now it beats dark types. Like come on, man. All right, but anyways, it's like the standard showdown thing. It's all right, I think overall. One thing I wanted to talk about is like a Tera tax system, which has been springing up more recently, where each Pokemon has like a customized Tera price and a regular price. And I think that's probably the optimal way to do it. But the thing is,
Mhm.
it's like a lot more time consuming to make a draft board, and then like balancing it is like a little bit harder.
It becomes a
Yeah.
lot more subjective, I think, is the only
Yeah,
issue. Like, a lot of people, like, this guy with Terra is super broken, super high point, or like, this guy, I haven't seen anybody use. Like, it becomes a little bit more iffy, but again, I do think it's the same thing, though, because there's some guys who are, like, low point shitters, like Superior. I know Superior isn't, like, broken, obviously, with Terra, but, like, without it, he's unbelievably terrible. But then with it, he's pretty good. Like, I can get, really steamroll through some teams and shit like that. So, like, I like that the price represents that, or like Iron
yeah,
Moth. I'm looking at the TGS stock right now. Like Iron Moth is a guy that's like kind of mid without Terra, but then with Terra, he's like kind of shice. Yeah.
yeah. I think it's just optimal, right? As long as you can balance
Definitely
the
opposite.
system properly.
Or King Gambit. That's another big one. Like he's cool without
Yeah,
Terra, I
yeah.
guess.
But
But
it's
Nah,
such
just
a
keep
big
the fucker
difference.
banned. That guy is banned.
Hey,
There's
all
like a
right.
lot of mon that like it's kind of hard to balance it, and like especially when you get to the lower tiers, that's where like the balancing starts coming into issue. Where like you
thankfully,
can,
most people aren't drafting it out of there. I mean, there might be some if you're doing like two caps and there's like pricing,
yeah,
but the ones that are gonna be broken at least most of the time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. So let's talk about Terra's influence on the builder, right? Team building wise, how easy or difficult is it to like prep for this? So like,
That's the one oh go ahead, sorry. Go,
all
go
right.
ahead.
So the great thing about offensive Terras is it allows like your sweeper to like turn the tables on its most obvious counter, right? Is this like too strong of an ability? Like in the game on screen right now, the Curum has Terra's Steel so that it can beat Primarina. And
Fuck.
yeah, yeah, you already know. And so now you need a secondary option to check Curum, right? because the Primarina isn't going to cut it because Kyurem can so easily just tech on a Tera type to deal with its most obvious counter being Primarina. So
So
like,
I think the biggest issue in general isn't like, well, now your Volcarona can hit my Heatran and kill. Like, obviously, that's the obvious statement is obvious, but like, I think it kind of restricts a lot of the counterplay to a lot of Terramons to like more offensive means. Like having Mons faster that revenge it with like neutral coverage or just like do a shit ton of damage or guys that pivot in and can take two like no matter what. Like more offensive counter, which isn't a bad thing, obviously. But like Gen 9's already so offensive. I don't like that I can't really one of the more frustrating things about Terra, I think, is that I can't really conventionally defensively check things. It's another reason why, again, like fatter playstyles, like we were saying earlier, are like really ass right now. Like they're not good because Terra kind of flips that on its head and takes your checks, your one check, and makes it into a positive matchup, and then you just don't have anything for it.
yeah, so like
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to mention real quickly is that in DPL, like everyone was still trying to figure out how to beat Terramons reliably, and like one of the strongest resources was like a fast encore or like a fast taunt or a mirror herb, right? Volcarona especially, like for example, mirror herb was like so common against that thing because it doesn't matter the Terra typing. You're always gonna match the boost, and like if you're faster with encore, you can always just lock it into Quiver Dance, right? But like it goes further than that, right? So like I don't know like specific examples. I'm not gonna go through like different things, but basically encore is hella good because it doesn't matter what type you are. You're always gonna get encored. You're always pretty much always gonna get T waved, right? Unless it's ground or electric, and you have preview to know that, right?
Hmm.
So that's another
Yeah,
thing.
that's
Klefki was like kind of a catch-all on a lot of
Oh, I
teams.
love Klefki in Gen 9. I
yeah,
Yeah,
love that
yeah,
guy in Gen 9.
and
and
Screamtail, I think was also.
yeah,
Yeah.
Screamtail performed super well in DPL because it's a fast encore mon. Like I think that's such a valuable thing to have in this gen. So like, well, it's like Screamtail is defensive counterplay to a lot of these threats, right? And like, there's not much that can also replicate that. So it's like, okay, not everyone can have a Screamtail, you know, but in
It's
general,
another option.
like people have been learning ways to like deal with Terramons, and like it doesn't matter what type they're going to be. This will help, you know, but it's not always so simple, right?
Another thing really quick too that I think is like big with Terra and like revenging these mons. Again, this is a very like broad statement, so it's not like yeah, well, this X Pokemon with this makes it to where you don't lose to Terra mons. But like I was talking earlier about like just making sure you're punishing these Terra guys, especially the setup guys. I think having like strong priority is such a big asset this gen opposed to other gens. Like it was obviously good before. It's not like you're gonna complain about having like a Banded Azumarill Aqua Gen on your team. Like that's sick. But like now especially having those like anti Mickey moves or like you were saying earlier, like Palafin Jet Punch, like it's just strong as shit. And if it's not a defensive typing that deals with that, that's super fire. I've loved having like Thunderclap on Bolt because unless it's Terra Ground, which the team I have has Rillaboom on it too. So like I always have strong priority into a ton of things to where like yeah they can set up and kind of like Mickey through potentially, but as long as I don't play super ass, I can put them in range of a really strong priority move. So I think that's another big thing too in Gen 9. I really like priority in general.
Yeah, I think, listen, not to toot my own horn, I like my TGS team a lot. I think that's like one of the things I kind of like, focused on. I have big mons like Scizor, I've got the Sneasler. But I feel like
Mhm.
another thing you kind of like, it's not that defensive, like, you can't go defensive, but like when you're choosing a defensive mon, you need to like look at things that it has to make sure it can actually like not get abused. Like there's moves like Foul Play, moves like Thunder Wave, Yawn. These are just like good moves to prevent
Mhm.
setup, especially with how physical the meta is. I think Foul Play is a really good move currently.
Yeah.
Just so many mons try to Swords Dance, Dragon Dance, and you just foul play them and remove any chance of them having sit up. So if you're like looking for defensive mons for Terra counterplay, you need to make sure you're not choosing mons that can just get walled by Terra. You need to make sure you're actually finding your correct value,
The
especially as well as
days
your offensive checks. The offensive checks are so important right now.
the days of just switching in and toxicking and slacking off until something dies
Yeah, like
and
Toxic's
regenning out. Like there's no toxic anymore, obviously. But even like on the monster, I don't know. Like again in the past, I could like make my slow bro live one hit from everything, and then like toxic, and then like regen and regen and regen, and then something would die or something like that. Or like I could pivot in, like I don't know. So like you can't like defensively just like wall things anymore. Like you're not gonna have a mon that's just like not 2 KO'd by everything. There's gonna be something that 2 KOs you or kills you.
Even
in Gen
Toxic is
9.
like unreliable at this point because it's Terra, Steel, and Poison. Like people
Yeah.
account for that. Like you have
On
to
like
really,
Crest, Lottie, shit like that. Yeah.
you really have to like choose if you're picking a defensive mon. You need to make sure it like, especially you need to like look at your value. You need to make sure this Pokemon's checking top threats. If this Pokemon's checking like some of these mid tier threats that you don't that are like not as prevalent, then, like don't bother. If you
You're
want to
probably
get
better off just
something,
killing it. Yeah.
yeah, get something anti meta that like can deal with a lot of the big mons at the top of the board.
Yeah, specifically, like, people be drafting, like, Fairy Resist that don't beat Enamorus and Iron Valiant. And at that point, like, it's not a Fairy Resist, right, functionally? But they're like, oh,
Yeah.
I've checked the box, I resist Fairy.
And that's another thing that Tera can help out with though, because like you
Exactly,
can
yeah.
patch up your weaknesses. Like you notice you're super weak to Fairy, and slap on a Tera Steel, Tera Poison on something.
Yeah, that's what A12 did versus me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I remember it's on your video like this guy doesn't have a steel type.
And then he rolled
But
up
he has
with, like,
two
two.
steel types.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that's valid. I had my water in day 12 spoilers for like in 2 weeks. It was Prim, but Prim got smoked by gunk shot on the Cinderace. Like, is my fire resist a fire resist? No, so I'm Terra Water on my bolt. So I can take hits from that guy.
Yeah.
Wow, spoilers. Told L5 not to play videos at games that were gonna happen.
Anyways.
Dude, I'm just talking about, dude, that's a little
He just
spoiler
waffling.
for the people.
Alright, so like the last point that I wanted to make about Terra in the builder is that it probably does like lean towards the offensive side for like favoring it, but defensively it is super nice as a tool as well.
That's how I feel like I end up using Terra more often. I don't know, maybe it's just like, I think it comes down to playstyle and stuff like that and how you feel most comfortable. But I like using my Terra to beat the other Terra. And then I feel a lot more comfortable. And again, me personally, I feel a lot more comfortable playing the game with like Terra kind of taken out of the equation. Like if, you know, my two guys are, the two guys are kind of canceling each other out in that regard, then I feel a little bit better. It's just kind of Pokemon after that. So I personally really like using Terra more defensively. Maybe it's because I
Yeah.
also draft fatter Terramons. Like in TGS, I have Raging Bolt, or like when we're doing low tier Terra and BBR, I have like it's taking like a low kicks or some shit. I got to Dunsparce because he's kind of broken when he turns into a water type or something like that. So
Yeah, that's like the big thing. Like when you have people like you with Raging Bolt, Aster with Archaladon, compared to
That's a
like
good one.
me and L5 with Enamorus and Excadrill, like some mons are gonna have more viabilities as an offensive Terra typing. That's why you draft the defensive Terra typing, something to counter other Terras.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Alright, so we can go on to our last segment, which is going to be, is Terra good in game? Like, is it healthy? So, one thing I want to address straight away, there's this huge 50-50 myth, like, oh, every turn's a 50-50 when they have the Terramon out. No, it's not. Like, be real with yourself. Like, come on.
Stop goofing around and think about it.
I think, I mean, they're obviously, like I was saying earlier, like I said 50-50 just because, like, that's the general term when you have, like, you know, a lot of options that your opponent can. I don't know, because I guess in that sense, every turn's are, 35 or 33, 33, 33 or some shit. But, like, there's definitely, like, a coin flippy aspect to it. But nothing's a true 50-50. And a lot of the time with Terra, too, you can kind of position yourself in a way that, like, okay, you need to Terra. Like, when I was playing in, fucking, what do you call it? Dude, damn it, I'm gonna spoil my game against L12 again. But it's not like the outcome. He was in with his Fez on my Bolt, and I didn't really want to tear my Bolt because I was water, and there was something that could kill it if it was a water type in the back. And I was like, oh, fuck. But then I kind of had to because it was my way of breaking down the Fez, and I was like, ah, shit, I got a Terra. I Terra watered, and it made the, a lot of the turns after that really scary and iffy because he played in a way like, okay, either I beat this now or he Terras, and I try and beat it with something else. So, like, you can kind of influence when your opponent Terras or when it's optimal for them to Terra, and you can play accordingly.
Yeah, and like, if we're being real, in Pokemon, there's only maybe like a small percentage of times where people are like, oh, this is a 50-50, I get this wrong, I lose the game. It's like a small percentage of them that are actually 50-50s. Most of them is just not weighing your risk reward correctly, which is the exact same case with Terra. Like, the exact same case with Terra. Like, there's no difference in that. You weigh your risk reward. It could be clicking terrestrializing your Pokemon. It could be clicking a setup move. It could be clicking an attacking move. They have the exact same idea. Terrestrializing is not the end all be all of like, oh, 50-50, he Terra's here, I lose, blah blah blah, cope, I can't win Terra. That's why it's not
I do. That's crazy. I do think that it does come up more though with Terra, obviously, and that's why it can feel frustrating. because it's not as common. Whereas like before, when you had those like this or that kind of moments, um, it felt more exciting because they weren't very common. And again, not that it's common now, but it is much more common, or at least you're thinking about it more often. I think is part of the reason it feels frustrating. I'm personally, and again, we're gonna kind of talk about like, you know, is Tera good in the game? Is like the general question. I don't think it's broken. Like I said, like a couple times in like the discussion, I don't think it's broken, but I also don't think like going no Tera because it's not super enjoyable, uh, or doesn't feel like it kind of dictates a good majority of the game is a bad thing. Because the way I saw it in like Gen 6 and 7 with Megas and Gen 7 with Zemus, they were mechanics and they like accentuated and like made the game different and exciting, but the game didn't feel like it completely revolved around them. It does feel a lot of time that Tera or the game kind of revolves around Tera and using it effectively and things like that, which again doesn't mean it's broken, but I see why that's not super enjoyable, and it's part of the reason why I personally don't enjoy Tera, I guess, and I'm not opposed to not playing with it.
Okay, it's definitely centralizing, but I don't think it's like any more centralizing than like Megas were in Gen
You think?
6 or like Z
Yeah,
moves
for
in
sure.
Gen 7. Like definitely more centralizing than Z moves, but I think Z moves have a bigger 50-50 element to them. Like
That's fair. No, that's for sure
like
true.
definitely more often than like, oh, is he gonna tear or not? Is like, is he gonna Z this turn or is he gonna predict the sack to the Z and then then he gets another kill? I feel like it's more impactful in Gen 7 to get the turn right, if anything.
I think
Like
it's fair. I think
maybe
it's
that's
definitely more.
maybe that's a bit of a reach, but it's like pretty equal, right? And like no
I
one
think with
ever had a problem with that in Gen 7. But like now because you can like see it so clearly, like the type changes in front of you and like it's like more noticeable, right? That it impacts the game. Like people think of it more often, so like the perception of the 50-50 is more often. I don't know. I'm kind of waffling there a little bit, but you get my idea.
I
Yeah, I
think
think
that's
like
fair for Gen 7. I don't know if for Megas I agree though. I think it's a little bit of a stretch to say Megas are like
Well,
as
megas are
impactful.
I'm saying um like influential in the metagame. Like it's
Mhm.
you have to like draft around the fighting type megas. Like they're like super good, like Lopunny, Metacham, and Gallade being like the big three. Like you,
Mhm.
if you're drafting a fighting check, it has to check those fighting type megas. No, not none of the other like regular fighting types are even like a footnote.
Yeah, I
hmm
guess it's fair.
And I feel like it's kind of like with the idea of how like the Z moves, like you have to get this turn right. The thing about that makes kind of back on why Terra preview is so much better than non-preview is there's in non-preview there's a lot of value to just kind of holding your Terra till the very end of the game because you have that big surprise factor. They don't know what Terra you are and you could completely losing the game right there. With preview, you can honestly just Terra turn one, turn two, whenever you see it in best meat because they know you can Terra. So
Mhm.
there's more room where Terra is not as much of a 50-50 game and more of I just want to get this off as soon as possible, and then you can keep playing your game strategy around that.
And I don't have to guess if your Gran is Waterium or Darkium or some like a bunch of different Z options that it can potentially be. Because obviously your scouts and your pivots are going to be different. But we're not having Z Crystal Terra preview. Actually, let's add that to the DPL USM rule set. Thank you. I'm
brother,
Darkium
brother, that
Greninja.
was like 8 years when that was
Terra
like,
Ice
We're
Z
drafting Z
free
crystals.
shock,
Actually, we're drafting Z crystals
oh
now.
my god,
I'm
dude. That
drafting
was
round two Flyinium. You're all cooked.
they were ahead of their time.
like who's taking the Terra Ice Z free shock here in black?
Shout out. But anyways, I think the whole
Shout
thing
out to
that
Graf.
that makes Terra like actually viable in draft and not like super giga broken is preview. I think
Yeah.
without preview,
Mhm.
it's like such a different story. And like thanks to preview, you can actually like play around it. Like the whole idea behind preview is that in OU, you generally know what Terra types are possible just due to metagame knowledge. But in draft, it's like not exactly the case, right? So
Yeah.
like having preview allows you to not get like turbo smoked because you guessed it wrong, which is like the biggest complaint early gen is like, oh, I guessed the Terra type wrong, so I lose. Like that was like one of the main talking points of when they suspected Terra in OU, right? But as time went on, people discovered it's actually just like metagame knowledge that
Mhm.
people didn't have at the beginning.
But obviously that's not the case in draft, you know. Like,
Yeah,
you
I'm
know,
just
you
saying. But
yeah,
like
yeah, no, I
in
know what you mean. Like
OU,
that's why it's not broken. No, you. I never feel like Tera's bad when I play. Like I'm not a big smog guy. I don't play a ton, but if I'm like bored at work and I'm laddering OU, I'm not like super pressed on Tera, and I don't even play that much. Again, it's just kind of like what Tera types are they, you know? And again, kind of forcing people into Tera positions and things like that. So I think that's interesting. I definitely agree. I think, and again, maybe the part of the reason where I dislike Terra so much is because I play a lot of Wi-Fi where it's not Terra preview. It is not the standard. So even if I'm guessing two typings, I don't fucking like guessing two typings. It's not fun. You know?
yeah. All right. So last thing we wanted to talk about is
I think you
Terra
said last like 3 minutes ago or like
well,
three
like
seconds ago.
last topic, but the last point of that topic, you know, is Terra in game uncompetitive or is it just a skill check?
Skill check.
I don't think it's inherently uncompetitive. I think it's probably a skill check. Again, whether or not it's fun or not, I think it's different. But I don't think at this point. And again, I also skill check in a nice way too. Like if you start, I think if like you're a new player playing draft and Terra's there, it probably fucking sucks for you. Like it's probably not very fun to try and deal with that and stuff like that. But I don't think it's uncompetitive inherently. I just think it might be a little restrictive sometimes, or the restrictive feeling.
I think there's like a big skill curve, right?
Yeah, big
Yeah.
skill curve.
Which I think
Especially
honestly is a fine thing for the format, right? Pokemon is a
Mhm.
game where like it's so like inconsistent if the better player wins, like for so many different reasons, right? Like at the end of the day, this is a game about probabilities. But like
Mhm.
allowing for greater skill expression, I think is just a good thing, just overall.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Again, you're always in a position where like if you're in your league and you want to do, you know, everybody can tear, or you want to ban all the top tear guys or whatever, you could just do that. You know, it's there's no big deal on it. I do think that Terra preview is always the booth though. I'm doing the other ones.
All right, I think that's gonna wrap it up. If you have any final thoughts,
so.
No,
What are your
I
guys' opinion on steak well done?
I'm not a fan.
there's a specific reason Zutra's in here right now. Tread carefully.
They put him in the oven. He's being cooked right now.
Well, he's been in there since last week when the video went up. Actually,
Bro
Yeah,
is
he's
yeah, well
fucking
cooked.
done.
donezo. Literally.
All
That
No,
was
right,
my
think
final thought.
that was it.
head empty, no thoughts. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.